everybody, this is Dianna Bellerose, and it's Sunday, 12:30 almost, and we have an amazing storyteller visiting us all the way from UK. His name is Tom Cranston, and he's gonna introduce himself to all of us. And welcome, Tony Cranston. It's a pleasure having you today.
Thank you, Diana. I'm really happy to be on your show. It's wonderful. And, well, who am I? My name is Tony Cranston, based in London. But for 30 years, I've been traveling the world, writing, collecting, telling stories, which is a wonderful job to have. I end up going to places that I would never have gone to otherwise. People just ask me to come over and tell stories, so I go there and tell stories. Places you wouldn't dream of, but I end up there and I meet real people. Most importantly, I meet a lot of storytellers and people who like stories. In the process of doing that, occasionally people say, will you write a book for us? So I've written 9 books. I'm on with my 10th, 11th, 12th and 13th books now. 10 CDs and about 800 articles on various topics. It seems that once a newspaper decides that you're a good writer, that they will ask you to write a topic or an article on this subject or that subject, even if you know nothing about it. So be careful what you read in newspapers, because it's often written by people who know nothing about it. They've just done a little bit of research. That's it. Are we still there? I hope we are.
Yeah.
We all there all the time? Did we go off, or are we still back?
Fine, it's fine. Just close
We're
the
okay.
door because everything is fine. The connection is just listening your voice absolutely amazing, because I can imagine stories how back then, not only with the stories and the way you're telling the story, which is really amazing. So, when did you decide to start doing, when exactly this idea came?
All your sound is disappearing. I heard 3 words out of all of that, but I'm guessing that you asked me, when did I start telling stories? Is that what you asked?
Yeah.
I started in the early 1990s, late 80s and 1990s. I was a magazine editor-in-chief. Brilliant job to have. Wonderful. I could get to interview anyone I chose to, since I was the boss. Celebrities, rock stars, movie stars, authors, all kinds of people. But mostly I let others do it. It was run by teenagers. I just happened to be their boss. And one person I did want to go to see was a fellow called Robin Williamson. Now, Robin Williamson was one half of a folk group in the early 60s, late 60s, early 70s, called the Incredible String Band, an English folk group. They were at Woodstock, and they're credited by the likes of Led Zeppelin and Van Morrison and all these people who think that they are gods. And I went to see Robin Williamson, who was now a storyteller. And wow, he was on a stage all by himself in a theater with a huge harp. And he started to play the harp and tell all of these Celtic, Arthurian romance stories, and King Arthur and Merlin and what. Oh, and for about 2 hours, you could hear a pin drop. Everyone listened to it. And then afterwards, I sat in the front row with him to interview him for the magazine, which was called Off the Wall, if you can still see it anywhere. And he told me that when he tells a story, it's his story. But then after hearing it, if I was to go off and say, tell it again, but maybe mix something up or get it backwards, forwards a little bit, or add something, or tell it with my tone of voice, or even miss something, then it's my story. But it's only my story until I passed it on to someone else and they go off and tell that story in their way. Then it becomes their story. And all we are temporary custodians of a story, passing them down from generation to generation. And I thought, wonderful. I was surrounded by models, singers, dancers, performers, musicians, everybody who was a something. And I was a nothing. But now I was a storyteller. And I started there and then. And a few months later, I was in a pub in Newcastle upon Tyne in the northeast of England. There was a storytelling event on, and they brought someone down from Scotland, Duncan Williamson, a gypsy storyteller from the Highlands of Scotland, the islands of Scotland. And he came down and he told, for 40 minutes, he told 2 stories, 1 joke and 1 song. And I sat opposite the table to him and I asked him, how much did he get paid for doing this? And the money he got paid, plus all his expenses, plus overnight travel and staying in a hotel and things, it was a fortune. And I said, wow, that's wonderful. He said, it's a good way to top up your pension, son. And I thought, yeah, that's it. That's my pension fund. And so now I'm a pensioner, just. And now I'm a pensioner. So one day I get my pension and go, I'm so poor. I'm so poor. But then I go into a school and triple it. So I can earn 3 times the amount of the monthly pension in a school. And I'm thinking, wow, good. Thank heavens I met those 2 people. They are wonderful. And that's why I became a storyteller. And I've been traveling here, there, mostly China, sometimes America, across Europe and Scandinavia and various places that I've maybe never gone to. I worked it out for an introduction to a book that I've actually worked and told stories in 72 towns and cities outside of the UK. So that's not bad, 72. Unless I could think of a 73rd one, I don't know. Maybe I'll come your way and tell a story over there. And I take a Chinese story, maybe a Chinese story, and then take it to America and tell it in America. I hear an American story and tell it in Britain. I tell a British story in France, which they really like. And then I tell a Scandinavian story in Russia or somewhere, and it's good fun. It's good fun because some of those stories they have heard. They've heard their own version of them stories. And that's what happens. Stories tend to have boots and they travel around. And it's marvelous to see where, if you go to France or go to England and you hear a story and you think, wow, that's a really good story, and you think it's English, nah, you find out it's really French. You know, who knows before it went to France where it came from. But I could tell you a story. It's about the 6th century from China. It's called The Butterfly Lovers, or as China will call it, The Legend of Zhu Yingtai and Lan Shanbo. It's a lovely story. Everybody thinks it's a fairy tale until recently, where they've dug around the West Lake in Hangzhou, southeast of Shanghai, and they found the ruins of some places and they found their grave. Now, it's 2, what we would say, children, 2 13, 14-year-olds, 1 boy, 1 girl. We know they've carbon dated the bones and everything. They know exactly when it was. That story must have been told, or Marco Polo would have heard of the story 600 years later, 1,000 years later, he would have heard of that story. And I don't know if he took it to Italy or someone else took it to Italy, but the story, same storyline, written different characters, became a play in Italy, very famous, toured Europe, marvelously famous, came to Britain, wow, wonderful. An English playwright heard that story and said, that's a really good idea for a story. Verily, that'd be a good idea for a story. And so he wrote his own version called Romeo and Juliet. William Shakespeare.
Ooh.
William Shakespeare can copy the story, so can all of you folks. Anyway, he's out of copyright, so it's all right.
Thank you
But
for
that's how I became a
sharing.
storyteller. And if you go to the West Lake in China, there is, because it's called the butterfly lovers, and the end of the story, they become butterflies. There's a species of butterflies only in that area, nowhere else in the world. And there's big penalties for anybody who touches them or damages them in any way. So maybe it's true. Maybe it's true. Maybe it's not a fairy tale. Maybe it's true. But look it up. You could find it on YouTube. You find it on YouTube. You can find it on Wikipedia. The Butterfly Lovers. Just look under that name. It's easy to find. It's one of my favorite stories. You get children laughing all the way through, and then at the end they cry.
Oh no! Why you love China so much? There for you.
Oh, I've always been China. I could tell you a story there too. My mum tells this story. When I was about 4 years old, and I know because I hadn't gone to school yet, I had an argument with my mum and said, right, that's it. I'm packing my bags and I'm off to China. And I got a brown bag, put a blanket in it to make it look full, put a nice white shirt on the top and slammed the door and went out. And I got all the way down to the end of the street across the road all by myself. I was only 4. And I sat there for a long, long, long time. And I had to tell a stranger, you're not supposed to speak to strangers, but I had to tell a stranger to go and tell my mummy that I hadn't gone very far yet. She could still catch me. So I've been running to China ever since. I was finally, when did I get to China? I was 37 when I got to China. At last, 37. Wow. Took a long time, but it was closed most of that time anyway. But I've always liked China, and I always go there, and I work in the Children's Palace in Beijing. I was the first Westerner to go there, to the Children's Palace in Beijing, and it's like a big arts performance school, but you learn reading and writing and arithmetic and all of those things anyway. But then you can have children from 3.5 years old to 19 years old in the same class.
Wow.
And whatever they're studying, if they're that good, they're in the same class. And no one 19-year-old will say, I'm in a class with 3-year-olds. I don't want to be in a class with 3-year-olds, because that 3-year-old might be even more talented than him.
Wow.
And I had 257 arts programs there. And I was the first foreigner to go there, to the Beijing one anyway. And I was teaching English and storytelling and learning how to run a children's palace back in England if I was to run one. Long story after that. But I go there every year if I can. And the children are brilliant. There's a fabulous big story all around the children's palaces. And if you're a teacher, it's the place to go. It's a place to go. If you're a teacher and you love teaching and you want to bring something out to the children's palace is the place to go. There's no money limits. There's no style limits. There's no limits of anything. You're just a good teacher, a good student. You can make them do anything. And it's worth it.
Wow.
And I learned a lot of story from them children.
That was That was a story from China.
Do you want a short one or a long one?
Long one.
A long one. Okay. Years ago, when I first went to the Children's Palace in 1993, I was in Miss Year's class, the English teacher. As I say, there was children there from about 3.5 years old to 19. They were all told to introduce themselves to me to practice their English. And one girl came and she was the obvious star. She had pigtails, a smile that split her face in half. She would flop her ears like this. Her name was Sujie. She'd be 8 going on 9. She spoke fluent English, not a participle wrong, nothing wrong. She was perfect. And everybody knew it. And the teacher, because teachers are allowed to do this. I don't know if in America they would be allowed to do this or anywhere else. But she said, Sujie, why don't you take Tony out to the park for the day? Show him around the park, explain everything to him. And so she volunteered to take me to Ditan Park. And this was when you see the Forbidden City in the picture of Chairman Mao. If you walk all the way through and you come out the other end where the motorway is, you think that's the end of the Forbidden City, the palace. It's not. There was another half across the road with a huge park and more buildings that was given to the children in 1949, or give it to Madame Sun Yat-sen in 1949, and she gave it to the children. That's the children's palace. So I have a big park there, Coal Hill Mountain, all the things there. It's the part of the Emperor's palace that no foreigner ever saw. Nobody went there. So she showed me around for the day. She came with herself, a friend. Her mum was there. A teacher came. My interpreter came, and China Central TV came. And we were all walking around the park, and it was made into a documentary. I would go to her home for tea. Her mum spoke, hello, sit, eat. That's it. Her dad spoke no English at all, not one word. Every year, one of the highlights when I would go to Beijing, she would meet up with me in the foreign bookstore on Wanfujing Street in China. She would help me buy books and CDs because I couldn't read. And I would teach her how to drink coffee at McDonald's. Good swap. And I would go home again with her for tea. Her mom would just drop her off for me. You know, I'm 37, she's 9. And the mum would just drop her off with me. We'd spend half a day together and then I'd take her home. Yeah, mum would just drop her off for me, and she's 9. Are we still there? Good. Year after year after year after year after year, I watched her grow up. She was good at English. She was good in French and Japanese.
Wow.
She was good at all the ologies. She was an actress and she was on the radio. She was clever at just about everything under the sun. Star. And then one day for some time I didn't hear from her, so I sent an email, hi, what's up, where are you? And I got a message back from her mom saying, Sujie didn't want to tell me in case I'd be upset. She had cancer.
Oh.
And before I got back to China, she died. And her mom asked me to bring all the photographs, the film, the letters that she wrote to me, everything back to China. So I took them all back and we're sitting in her room. I'll get to the story in a moment. This is a prequel. We're sitting in Sujie's room. On the back of the wall over here, there's a picture of me, Sujie, and a friend still on the wall. Her mom is here and she is in front of the computer. Her face is lit up with a computer screen. Her dad is somewhere behind me. My interpreter over there. We're watching the photographs of Sujie. A hair shaved off, but pretending to be a Shaolin monk. Okay, she was good. Sometimes with wigs and with all her friends around her, always looking happy. She was never a sad child at all. And I saw it. You've got to remember I'm English and we have this stiff upper lip. But I saw it, lit up by the computer screen, coming down her face. The tears were falling down her face and I didn't know where to look. But then I looked back and saw the face of her dad, of her father. And I've never, never, never seen a face like that. Never. I'll not forget that face. She was a good child, brilliant child, gone too soon. And the family, of course, one parent family, they were devastated. But Sujaya taught me some wonderful stories. This is one of them. Once there was a man who dreamed all day and all night of just maybe once in the whole of his lifetime, he could just see the wonderful, the mysterious, the magical Firebird. That's all he ever dreamed of. All day he would look among the clouds in the blue sky. All night he would look up among the stars. Then one night, on his farm, by the woods and near the lake, it came floating through the silent darkness of space, the wonderful, the mysterious, the magical Firebird. He couldn't believe his eyes. The Firebird. But then he couldn't believe his eyes as the Firebird came floating down to the edge of the lake because she was thirsty, as Firebirds often are, took off her feathers and became a beautiful young girl and went swimming in the water. He was a nice man, but he couldn't help himself. He couldn't help himself. He went straight up to where the feathers were, picked them up, took them into his garden and buried them in the garden. Later, when the Firebird came out, she looked everywhere. She looked here, she looked there, she looked everywhere. Where were her feathers? She's lost them. They're gone. Maybe the water washed them away a little bit. No, can't find them. Maybe the birds took them among the trees. No, she couldn't find them anywhere. She began to be upset and she started to cry because without her feathers, she couldn't be a Firebird anymore. Just then, the man came out, put his arms around her and said, there, take care. Don't worry about anything. I will take you home with me and look after you. Don't worry. You'll be fine. And he took her back to his home. And wow, he was such an amazing person. He did everything for her. He would comb her hair for her. He would tell her to put her feet up. He would let her watch TV, any channel she wanted, any program. He'd take her for long walks. He would take her for shopping. He would, he would wash the clothes for her. He would clean the house. He would make the breakfast. He'd put the dishes away properly in the proper place. Yes, everything. He was really good. And you know, after a while living with him, she kind of liked him a little bit. And after a while, she began to like him some more. And after a while, she fell in love with him. And they got married. And later they had a beautiful little boy. Oh, he was gorgeous. He was handsome. He was dark hair, dark eyes. He was wonderful. The apple of his mother's eye. She adored him and she loved her husband. She loved her child. And the years rolled by until that young boy was about 9 years old. And he went to look for treasure where the pirates might have come across the lake to bury the treasure in his land. That'd be a good place to bury the treasure, it might be. That'd be right. That'd be the good place. Well, he looked over here with his spade and he dug there and he dug over there and he dug everywhere. And then at last he went into the garden and began to dig. And he saw something golden, something shining. Wow. It's wonderful. Wow. I pulled it out of the soil gently, and it was a cloak of golden feathers. And he went straight to his mummy and got down on his knees and gave it to his mummy and said, Mummy, look what I've got. I found a golden treasure. You can have it for you. His mummy took the feathers, laid them across her lap, and began to stroke them, feeling the softness and remembering that she was really a firebird. But what should she do? She put down the feathers and become a firebird and fly away. How could she ever leave her husband? How could she leave her child? She loved her child. She loved her husband. Should she be a mother, a wife, live as a human? Should she be a firebird once more? After all, she was a firebird. She thought and thought and thought. And then at last, she put on the cloak of gold and feathers and became a firebird once more. But before she left, she gave her son 3 golden feathers, one for good luck, one for happiness, and one for love. Then she flew away, never to be seen again. The end.
Wow. Absolutely wonderful.
And that story was told to Sujir by her mom. Her mom came from Mongolia. Maybe that story before that, because it's a firebird story, was maybe Russian. So it's gone from Russia to Mongolia to China to me, and I've taught it all around the world and told it to you tonight. You can pass that story on to anyone and tell it yourself now. Tell your version of the story.
Beautiful. Yeah.
The idea of the story, though, in its ending, which is typical of a Russian story, it's typical of that kind of story. They like to leave the stories with an ending like that because they want you to say what happened next. Did she come back 10 years later, maybe 20 years later, a generation later? Did she change her mind and come back straight away? It's your story. You write the next part of that story. The Firebird Part 2. The Return. Be a good
Who
movie.
knows? Definitely. It always leaves you wonder what is going to happen, I believe. More and more from the story. I remember stories of my mother and grandma. I always wanted more. And what happened next? What happened next?
Yes. Yes. Well, give that story to children and they will come up with something next. I've gone to schools to tell that story and say, what happened next? Tell me when I come back next time. And they all write a story about what happens next. Some of them will collaborate together to write the story with a friend or something. And every story is different. Every story is different. The great endings to the story is good. And some children are even clever enough to get another one and a stop and then say to me, what happened next? Oh, so I have to write part 3. It's a good story, but that's where I learned stories. And at the moment, I'm book 11 will be a storyteller in China, and it's my journey in China over nearly 30 years. 1993, 2003. That's 2013, 23, that's 30 years. So by the time it comes out, it'll be 30 years traveling around China, learning stories from different people. And that's the first story dedicated to Sujie. And that'll be the first story. The story of why I was in China, the people I met, their own personal story, and the stories they told me. Revolutionary veterans in Shanghai, tour guides in Guilin, a monk in the Shaolin Temple. The chief abbot told me a story, and that ended up as this one. Can you see? Mei Mei's cat. It ended up as that story.
Yeah.
We
Wonderful.
collaborated on a story together. Just there and then, as we sat and drank tea, we both told the story together. And that's how it came out. So I guess his version of that story now is probably more martial arts than mine is. but that's one of the stories. You can find that online, actually. If you just look up my name and type in May's Cat, you can find it and you can download it for free. And it comes because it comes with things like, comes with games and activities to go with it. And things like this. It's not the best designed book in the world, but it has a lot of things in it. It's all meant to be children. It was meant to be picked up cheaply, and so on. Different games and things to do, etc. Oh yeah, even that one, diary. And it seems, you know, they were asking me for about 16 different items to go with it. And I would send 16 in, but they always just chose the first 8, no matter what I sent in. So I've got 8 left over of these 6 different books. So I've got 48 items left over for the next books, whatever I might write. Come on, everybody, ask me to write you a book and I will write the book. Just give me a deadline too. Next Tuesday, fine.
Oh, wow. So you can write the book in one night, having problems, and think that book written for 1 year,
this is what
2 years.
See my book here. This is for all your younger people and people who want to write. This is a list of stories that's in here. 44 stories so far. But what I do is this. I will, let's choose. I was told this years ago, always use one side of the book to write my things. Of course, nobody can write a story all in one go. It tends to need put away and then come back again. So I will write this outline of the story, and then later I will come back and add bits to it on the opposite page. So it goes through the whole book is like that. You can see the story. Where's it at? The story. And then the blank page, just with being filled in. A story and then bits added in. And I have maybe 15 of these books. So if someone said, write me a story, I'll just say, what about? Because I've already got them written. And I can fill these out and add them as much as I like. More recently, a new one just came to me. And I learned a story Thursday night. I was listening to it, or Wednesday night or Thursday night, I learned a new story. So it was quite good. I'll give you that story because I think it'd be really good. Everybody should tell the story. It's clever. Okay. When the first astronauts went to the moon, the astronaut found that there was a people already living on the moon, but they were so tiny. They were about the size of a bean, and they could sit in the palms of your hand. Now, the astronaut fell in love with one of the girls from the moon. He said, I love you. Will you marry me and come to live with me in my world? You will? Oh, I better ask your father? Okay, I'll go and ask your father. Sir. Oh, yes, of course. Honorable sir. Would you give me the honor of marrying your daughter and bringing her to my world? You will? Oh, wonderful. Try telling that to children. They will love it. I just learned that the other night. I thought it was a clever story. It's from an old movie, 1961. An American movie, 1961. The Flower Drum Song with Nancy Kwan and someone else. I forgot her name now. Good actress. And they told that story, and I thought, oh, wonderful. These stories can go by you in a movie and not notice, but I see stories, and that was clever. And I will pass that story on to children, and I know they will go home and tell it to their mummy and daddy. But you're good too,
Nice.
being a storyteller and what's your word? Everybody says I should do this too, since I'm teaching yoga and things like that, which I've been doing for a lot longer than I've been telling stories. 45 years now I've been teaching hatha yoga. It's been a good life. It means I've met a lot of nice people. Nobody who goes to yoga classes or coaching classes or anything like that you might do, or rough people, nasty people. They're always nice and gentle people. Otherwise, they wouldn't be going there in the first place. You know, so I've had 45 years of meeting a lot of nice people. I don't know how many thousands, but I met a lot of them. And I hope I've done them well for the relaxation, you know, which is every teacher can do dog's pose, cobras, warrior poses, Surya Namaskar, all of those things. They all have their specialities. I know a teacher who can stand on her head for 40 minutes and think everybody else should be able to as well.
Oh my gosh.
No matter what your age. But my specialty is relaxation. My oldest student is 96 years old, and she is healthier than I am. Molly, she is brilliant. She's such a nice lady. She brings me bottles of Guinness for my birthday. I apologize, that's not really Irish Guinness. She's good. I like them all. When they come into the class, they're all in their 80s and 90s in that class. And when they come in, they are dreams. They are treasures. They are the expert of what you and I and all of you people listening want to be. We hope to be 80s and the 90s and still fit and healthy and still be able to do warrior poses and Surya Namaskar, and come up to me later and say, that class was so easy today. Can we do it a bit harder next week? I want to be like her. And the storytelling, of course, keeps my brain going.
Absolutely. Yoga is amazing. Good for you should come to London and we should meet and tell me what you're doing so I can meet you. It'll be great.
What would you like to ask me?
You hear me?
Only just
ask you once again for give us a really good story, from probably other, I don't know, Navy or anything that you should hear today.
I like stories that have sharp endings. I like every story. I don't think there's ever a story I've never liked. And I've liked every single storyteller because they're telling me a story. I don't care if they've got a good voice or got good actions or good mime or anything. It's the story that counts. So don't think you have to have a really big BBC voice or radio voice or anything. You don't need that. You tell them your way. If everybody told the same story in the same fashion, oh, it'd be so boring. So I like stories that would you see, I have a lot of stories. I like funny stories personally. I like funny stories, but everybody thinks I tell a good ghostly story. I don't know why. I maybe just because I've told some of them in the past, but I do like funny stories and I like funny jokes. And I'm not the kind of storyteller. You know, there seems to be two types of storytellers. One storyteller who will tell the story the way it was written down 200 years ago in exactly the same fashion, because that's the traditional way of telling the story. And if you don't like the ending of the story, don't tell it. But That's the way that just happened to be written down at that particular time 200 years ago. And who knows who edited it anyway. 200 years ago, that's the way it was written down. It was probably being told 1,000 different ways for 100 years before that. You know, that was just that particular one. So I don't see why you should stick to that. And when we come to stories, I like Disney stories. He has better endings. I like the Disney Living Happily Ever After story because is it Cinderella? Prince Charming and Cinderella? I think so, isn't it? Cinderella married Prince Charming. At the end of that story, they both walked down the aisle, got married, and lived happily ever after. Perfect. In the original French story, they walked down the aisle, and blackbirds came out of the ceiling and pecked out their eyes. What story would you like best to tell your children? It's quite obvious you're going to take the Disney one, aren't you? You know, he knows what he's doing.
Yeah.
Is what he's doing. Can you imagine the story taking the children all the way through an animated version of that story and then they get their eyes pecked out at the end? Now, I know some French storytellers and say, well, that kind of stuff happens. And it's French anyway. They like it. But I don't know. I prefer the Disney version of it. So let me see if I can get you a story. Okay. 16th century story. 16th century story, an old one. Should I tell it the way it was written down 1600 years ago? Sorry, I can't read Chinese, so it's going to have to come in English and out of my voice. Sorry, no speaking Chinese. No, my wife is Chinese. If she heard me, my wife is Chinese. If she heard me saying that, she'd go, how dare you say that? And then she gives me wonderful ideas for stories. Wonderful ideas for stories. Oh, she's really good. And my laugh, I could do, like, let me see. Young man. I learned that from her. She called up the stairs once and said, would you like a cup of tea, dearie? No, thank you. Anyway, I think we come to the story. 16th century. A young woman gets up in the middle of the night to go to the bathroom. Finished in the bathroom, she comes back, but here's a kind of rustling sound in her child's bedroom. So she goes into her baby's bedroom and finds that a wolf had come through the window and now had her baby in its mouth. The mother sees the wolf sees her, and the wolf jumps straight out of the window. The woman, without a thought about it, dives straight out of the window after the wolf, chases down the garden with the wolf, pins it into the corner, and the wolf just looks at her. And then she bashes the wolf on the side of the head over and over again, and he drops the baby. Just then, the wolf decides to go, and his red eyes glowing. But at that moment, all the lights come on and the homes around. The wolf, seeing this and people coming out of their doors to see what the commotion was, decides to run away. All the people come out to see what had happened. And the woman, very animatedly, picks up a baby, tells everybody all about it, how the wolf was in the bedroom and how the wolf jumped out the window and how she dived out of the window after it and how she hit the wolf and how the wolf just dropped the baby and stared at her just as the lights came on. And she was happy to tell them the whole story with arms moving all around the place and very animated, very good story. And all the people would go with their mouths open. When she finished, it was just then she noticed she was completely naked. Two monkeys in a bath. One monkey was going, and the other monkey said, I told you to put some cold water in first.
gosh, you make me laugh. I'm still watching this. It's gonna make the Sunday these stories. We need to laugh right now. Hearts
Yes.
and bring this light. So think about the things that are not how people can cope with it.
Yes, there's a lot of things going on in the world, but there always has been. And if you think our world is pretty poor, wars and what have you, go back 2,000 years, it was a lot worse. You know, this whole peoples, whole races of people gone. They don't exist anymore because somebody like the Romans or whatever came along and just decided that's it, finish them all, destroy them. They destroyed people to the sense where they destroyed all the buildings, all the houses, all the land. They ripped up the land, they tore it apart and took their name out of every book and of any historical document everywhere. It was gone. And we only find out about these things through fragments of documents left behind on stone tablets and things. The Mongols were another group who did that to certain peoples who got in their way. Genghis Khan, he said that to the people that he was conquering, you must be very evil people. Because if you weren't very evil people, God would not send somebody like me to destroy you. So he's in his way, really. But there's some good stories out of that. There's some brilliant stories. Lots of stories from the Mongols. They're great stories. They have good stories, good folk tales. The worst folk tales I've had are from Greenland. They're always swearing. Why do you have to swear?
Can you
Something I never learned how to do. What? No, I can't tell a story like that without swearing. And when I picked up a couple of books once and read through them, I thought, oh, they're dreadful. Who could I tell that story to? It's disgusting, the dirty, the horrible. You know, so maybe there's some nice stories out there. If there are some clean, lovely, wholesome, children-friendly stories from Greenland, please send me them. It'd be lovely to have them, really. And please criticize me if I'm saying all of this wrong or all those stories were terrible. But please criticize me. If you've got some good ones, send them to me and prove it. I want to see them. Just maybe those two books. Just maybe those two books are not very good. Another story. An Irish publisher said to me, "Have you got any stories about revenge?" Revenge? I'm a yoga teacher. What do I know about revenge? I've never lived in a world like that before. I don't know. I've never had enemies. I've never made an enemy of anybody. I don't know anything about revenge. And I thought, well, I could probably twist a story and have a revenge thing, or I could find one somewhere and just rewrite that. And then I thought and thought and thought. Just when I give up, I had the end of a story. And this is backfilling that story. Once there was a young man who, in his infinite wisdom, as young men really are wise, in his infinite wisdom, he thought it would be a good idea to sneak into his girlfriend's apartment in the middle of the night to give her a good scare. So, in the wee hours of the morning, he has a key, he opens her apartment door. He walks across the living room and he's just about ready to go into the bedroom to give her a good scare when he has another wonderful idea. He goes into the kitchen, opens the cupboard, takes out a bottle of ketchup, puts his finger in the jar and puts it all around his eyes and down his face and around his lips and dripping down to make himself look like gold blood and even more scary. But then when he looked at himself in the mirror, in the kitchen mirror, he thought, ooh, well, he didn't recognize himself. He thought, wow, that's really scary. And he come to his senses then. He said, no, maybe this is not a good idea at all. Maybe, I might scare her. She might have a heart attack. She might even were still finished with me. Oh my goodness. So he decided not to do it. He took it all off and he sat at the table with a cup of coffee in the kitchen. In the morning, she gets up, a bit disheveled, but oh, happy to see him. What are you doing here? And he tells her all about it, about how he put the ketchup on his face and so on, how he thought it was a good idea. But when he saw his face in the kitchen mirror, he thought, oh, I better not. It's maybe too scary. So I thought, better not do it. But at that moment, she began to shake. She began to shiver. She was visibly scared. And he said, well, what's wrong? I didn't actually do it. I didn't scare you after all. I've just been sitting here. What's wrong with you? And she said, we don't have a kitchen mirror. Think about it. And so I sent that in, and he said, oh, wonderful, perfect, brilliant. That was just it. And then the same, another tip for all of you writers as well, writing short stories and things. There are a lot of compilation books and magazines with maybe 10, 12 stories in. And because they printed, if it's A5, it'll be printed in 16-page sheets, print blocks, prints. And if they've got 15 pages, they're either going to have a blank page in the book, or somebody hopefully writes them a one-page story. And they're always looking for a one-page story for a book and a magazine. So write them and send them in. They love them. If they don't use it now, they'll use it later. They always like them. I wrote a lot of one-page stories. You'd be surprised about getting. I know I'm looking for one, but I've told you a lot of stories up to now, so I better move on a little bit. Anyway, you could get my books. There's about 6 of those books if you Google my name and just look up Tony Cranston, and you will find a lot of titles. Maymay's Cat, Sototo and the Princess, The White Swan, The Little Swan Maiden, The Fail Up Phantom, all of those stories. You'd find all of those books with the activities to go with them for Key Stage 1 and 2, or primary school kids and families, really. And you find all those books are easy to download for free. But if you want to find hundreds of stories, including many by me, go to Talking Stories on East London Radio. That's our Mixcloud, Talking Stories, playlists, Talking East London Radio. Just look it up and you'll find it. Or Google my name and look me up on Facebook and you'll find it there. Anyway, Talking Stories Radio on Facebook. And you'll find stories by, I think it's now 162 storytellers from around the world, everywhere around the world. We've had all kinds of stories, young and old. The oldest is that 96-year-old I told you about in my yoga class. She's good. And the youngest was about 6, who's won every award under the sun. And I think, Diana, you've been on some of the Zoom events and things with her. Shania Singh.
Oh, yeah, the little girl. Oh, my God.
Shania Singh and Manat, another girl. Yeah, she's really clever. Our parents are really clever for backing her too. And Savi Singh as well, another one. She's really good. She's about 9 years old. And these are the future, the vanguard, the new wave of Indian storytellers. And I'm happy to see children going so well for storytelling. And it's, you know, we're running into this 21st science fiction century, and all the things like going to Mars and going to the moon and Star Trek and all of that's going to come true by the end of the century at least. So as we rush into it, I think we need something a little bit older, connected to this bit inside here, you know, something deep inside of us. Stories and storytelling can do that easily. So keep it going, folks. It's kind of like a balance, isn't it? And I think now, as we are rushing into the 21st century and all the science fiction, I think there's more and more storytellers ever. More and more storytellers ever. We're always trying to coax each other to be storytellers. Really, it's quite good. The brain is hardwired for storytelling. When I tell a story, if there's something there about speed and about running away or running forward, those parts of my brain will switch on. But you, the listener, your parts of your brain will switch on to the same parts. When you listen to a story or tell a story, even read a story, then all the parts of your brain are switched on. When you're watching a movie, that doesn't happen. Just maybe 2-3 parts at the most are switched on, and you've got a lot. And whenever you learn anything, it starts here in a kind of reception area of your brain. And then when you sleep at night, that's why you need good sleep, then it gets departmentalized into the other areas of the brain, and it's stored and remembered when it's needed to be remembered. Everything you learn goes that way. So what you learned this morning, what you've learned today on here, will be in your sleep tonight. You will sleep well, it'll be departmentalized, and one day someone will say something to you and say, oh yes, I know. And it'll be there. It's good for your brain. It keeps your brain box going. It's good for things like dementia and all of that stuff too. It's good for not giving you dementia, but keeping it away. And I'm sure 99.9% of all cases of elderly people who are getting dementia is only because we younger people don't talk to them anymore. Don't talk to them anymore. We give up. We send old people off to the old folks' home. And that's dreadful. It happened in Britain in the 1950s. We start putting them into old people's homes. And now it's just, oh yeah, when you're old, you're in an old people's home. And when you go to India and China, that never happened until recently. It's starting to happen. They're opening up old people centers all over the place now for people who don't need them, just people who are lonely and their family don't care. That's basically it. They don't care. My wife works as a care worker for a few years, and the stories she told me were just dreadful. You know, about families who don't care, just don't care at all. I know those stories too. But look on the bright side. I know when I get, oh, let me tell you, I was in a center a few years back telling stories, and it was full of, it was like an elderly people's home. And on the wall, I saw posters of the Kinks and Led Zeppelin on the wall. And I'm thinking, were these people really interested in the Kinks and Led Zeppelin? And I thought, ah, yes, I was. I'm that age myself. But then when you look at people like the Kinks or Led Zeppelin or the Rolling Stones, look what they're still doing now. They're still playing. They're still gallivanting around the world. They're still doing all this stuff. So can you. If they can, why can't we? And they're a bit older than us, so they can. Why can't we?
Yeah.
So don't let anybody put you down. Don't let anybody tell you what to do. You know, be a rebel.
Yeah,
Everybody
exactly.
treats themselves nice on a Friday or a Saturday night after they finished work. That's brainwashing. You've had that all your life. Now, be a rebel. Treat yourself good on a Sunday night, on a Monday night, on a Tuesday night. Do something different. Wear different clothes. See different people. Every week, go and put one thing in your shopping trolley that you've never tried before. Chances are it might be awful, but it might be wonderful. You don't know. Just try it. Try something different all the time. Don't care what people think.
I love it.
That's what happened to us when we were younger. There were younger people listening. You know, you think to yourself, oh, I want to do this. I would like to be a movie star. I would like to be a writer. I'd like to be a storyteller. I would like to be a life coach. I'd like to be all kinds of things. Then if you listen to your friends and tell your friends about it, they will say, how can you do that? You know, you're not famous or anything. And they put you down. What they're really doing is putting themselves down because they don't think they can do it. Maybe they can't, but you can. If you have the dream, you wouldn't be given the dream in the first place if you weren't allowed to do it. That's for true. You would never have that dream ever. Let's face it, you could dream about any kind of things and want to do any kind of things, but if you have a dream to do one thing, keep it to yourself. Just make small steps and go for it. Keep that goal in the back of your mind and just keep working for it little bit by little bit. And it seems that we take one little step forward, but whoever controls the universe comes all the way this way towards you, and you'd be surprised at what you can do. You'd be surprised. How I did things was when I wrote this book, I actually wrote the book. Let's have a look. With these children, primary school children. When I say I wrote it, they wrote it. I just edited it and I coaxed everything out of them. They wrote this book. This is their village, their town in the northeast of England. It's 2,000 years old. They wrote it themselves. At the age of 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, they had a book in the bookstore. Can you imagine what they'd be like at that age? I've got a book. I've written a book. It's in the bookstore. I show you. I can promise you. It's there. It's there. It's there. I did it. I did it. I did it. And that's only because I encouraged them to do it. Somebody else might have said before, you know, if they can do it, so can you. So can you. And one thing I've seen, and I mention this all the time when I'm doing workshops, writing workshops and things, is that people seem to think, oh, I want to write a book. But somehow or other, they think they must write the most perfect, brilliant, best ever book ever. So thick, so big, you know, and start from the beginning and finish at the end. No one has ever done that. Let me tell you, go into any charity store, go into any bookshop, and look at all the titles of the books, and you'll find something there. All about tractors. How to get rid of that spare tire. Not your spare tire around your waist, but the spare tire that you have in the garden. How to grow tulips. All kinds of stuff. You just look at the junk titles that they have there. But someone wrote that book, someone published it, and someone bought it. So it doesn't matter what you write. Someone will go for it. Writers must write, as that Greek philosopher said. Writers must write, no matter what it is, whether it's a book, whether it's an article, whether it's the label on a tin of beans, anything, you have to keep writing. People get paid for writing those labels. I used to. Choosing the right color as well. We'd even take it to places to have groups of people looking at it and say, what color do you like? Do you like the blue color, the red color, the yellow color? And we make different ones, and then we choose from what they say. And there are places all around the world, in every country, that has certain areas. America's got them, Britain's got them, ours is Carlisle. And there are places where the demographics equal the demographics of the rest of the country, like X amount of elderly people, young people, this kind of people, that kind of people, all there. And when they find a town like that or a city like that, that's where they go to do everything first. Everything is released there first. Everything is done there first. And they would talk to those people first. We have a town here called Carlisle in the Lake District in the UK, and that's our place where we go. Everything happens there first. And we talk to those people. And that's what they do. Nothing's left to chance. So go for it. Or be a writer, be a storyteller, be whatever you want to be. If I can do it, you can do it. And it doesn't matter how old you are either. No way. In fact, maybe if you're older and you decided to write a book, maybe then you've got something inside you to write. Or certainly you can write it better than you could when you were 10. But if these children can write a book, so can you. In fact, we sent the children off home. It was the 3rd of July, 1993. It's a Saturday, and the time was 2:05 in the afternoon. And the parents had to stop them and ask them some questions at that particular time. There were 22 children, so we were hoping for 22 different things that they were doing for 22 different reasons and capture that moment in a book forever. So it was all kinds of questions. Where are they? What can they see? Who, what, where? What is the weather like? And so on. What would they change, if anything? Listen, this is from Claire, who is now the head teacher of this school, by the way. On Saturday, I went to visit my granddad's grave. He has just died. I saw lots of flowers and gravestone. Some of them had Our Lady on, others had a window with a candlestick or a Bible or a rose. It was very sunny and it made the flowers look pretty. I thought Grandad would not be coming to Lancaster to see us anymore, and I felt sad because I miss him so much. I was with my family because my brother and I wanted to see Grandad's grave. The good part was knowing that Grandad was still there, but the bad part was that I did not want him to die. If I could change anything, I would wish for Grandad to be back, but I know he is happy in heaven with Jesus. Claire. Now, that's her writing. And she told me years later that because I put that in the book, because I wanted that in the book as a major piece, that she thought, hey, maybe my ideas are important after all. Maybe I can do something. Maybe I'm interesting after all. Maybe I can do things. And that was Claire. Don't know if you can see him. That was Claire. And now she is the headmistress of that same school I worked in to get this book done. So, very well done. They can do it, we can.
Absolutely. Anything is possible. Anybody, the only person you should listen is follow your dreams and take little steps every day.
Yeah.
Think.
Yeah. And don't worry if one day you can't take a little step because somebody's already made a bigger step towards you. So it always happens.
Exactly.
You can do whatever you want. Just when I was the magazine editor, to get back to that bit, I interviewed a lot of people and they had one thing in common. They had a dream and then they had somebody to encourage that dream. And if you look at all the famous people in the world, they had an uncle or an auntie or a cousin or a nephew or a granddad or a mom or dad who just encouraged them a little bit, even a teacher who encouraged them a little bit. That's what you're doing. It's what I'm doing. And now as a radio presenter, as an author, as a teacher, children look at me and say, oh, he must be an expert. So if this expert tells them that they are good at writing, they go home and say, Mummy, this expert told me I'm good at writing. Not just you tell me, because you're my mummy and you always say that I'm good at writing. But this expert said I am, so I must be. And that's all. That's all I'm doing. All the time, everywhere I can. That's all I've tried to do. One little word is all that is needed sometimes. One little girl taught me something. I asked her how old she was. This is when I could speak French really well. Quel âge êtes-vous, ma petite, or something. And she said, it all depends on who I'm with. If I'm with my daddy, I'm very, very young. If I'm with my mummy, I'm very, very old. If I'm with my big brother, oh, he's such a sissy. I'm much older than he is. But if I'm with granddad and grandma, oh, I'm just like them. I'm very old. And you know what? This child has never been her proper age ever. And to me, since I heard that way back in the 1970s, I've never been my proper age either. Never. I work with 96-year-olds in my classes and I become 96. I work with 5-year-olds telling them stories and I become 5 years old. And everything in between that day. And then 7 days a week. And for the last 50 years, I've never been my proper age. I refuse to be anyway. There's no point. And if anybody asks me my age, I will always lie. Or I would just tell them that. I would tell them that story. But children can teach you a lot of things. They're good.
That's very
They see things in
true.
black and white. That's what this book is for. They see their town in black and white. One little boy made an observation when I asked him which is the better, the summer or the winter. He said in the summer, because in winter everybody's too cold and they pass each other and they don't want to speak and they're trying to get home. But in the summer, everybody stops and speaks to each other and they're very friendly and they've got smiles on their face. It's much better in the summer. What an observation for a small child. And he's so right. He's so correct.
Yeah, that's true. But children are very intelligent. Thank you so much for the stories, for trying to post some links to your books, interview. Thank you, Hart, and I'm sure we here on Sunday right now 35 here, and that this is going to make people feel, just because we are dealing with illness issues here, and good energy stories like you help us cope with things that are pressuring us, and stress and everything we shouldn't experience. So thank you so much, and I will have you hear more of your stories, and I'm sure with us right now they would love.
Thank you for having me on your program. It's been wonderful. Again, the sound quality from your side, I hope it's picked up very well, and the final recording, I hope as well, because I haven't really heard much of what you've said. So I don't know, to be honest, sorry, but I don't really know, if I've answered the question you've asked me in the first place. I don't really know. I hope I have. I hope.
Yes, you did, and everything was amazing.